Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening for February's monthly Black Liberation Caucus meeting. It is such an honor and a pleasure
Oh,
that we
Rebecca,
have. Yes.
there seems like people are having trouble getting in. So
Oh, no.
George,
Okay.
Destiny Wallace just called me and she needs you to resend her the link. Destiny.wallace@gmail.
Okay, I sent it.
Okay. Are we ready to begin? I will take that as a yes. All right. I wanted to do a really quick round of introductions. We have the international president of both with us this evening, and she is coming in from Nigeria, well, calling in, I should say, and it is very, very late. So in order to honor her time with us this evening and make sure that we give enough time, I wanted to just do a very quick check-in, your name, location, and branch, and one word of how you're feeling today. Before we begin, I just wanted to thank everyone for showing up. There's so much going on in the world, in our country, in our neighborhoods, maybe even in our homes. So just thank you for being here for yourself and for each other this afternoon and evening. My name is Rebecca. I am from the Detroit branch, and my thought for this evening is solidarity. I will pass it to the person to my right, which is Shantae.
Excuse me, I was chewing. My name is
Um,
Shantae McLaughlin. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm with the Metro Atlanta branch. And my thought for today is gratitude. And I will pass to Julie. You're on mute.
My name is Julie Kabukani. I'm from the Boston Wilf branch, but I'm currently in Geneva for 10 days. So I'm really close to Ukraine, but everything is quiet here so far. So yeah, and I'm happy to be here. A little bit worried about what's going on in the world at this moment. Or should I introduce the next speaker?
So you can pass to someone else or someone else can jump in.
Okay, so I'm gonna pass on to George Friday.
Good afternoon or good evening if you're Joy. Thanks so much for being here. I'm George Friday. I'm in Gastonia, North Carolina, part of the soon-to-be sanctioned Southern Piedmont branch, currently in the Triad branch. Someone's got something loud going on. And I will join with Rebecca's energy around solidarity. Toya's email bounced, Shantae, I sent it again. And that is me passing it also off to you, Shantae, for you to introduce yourself if you haven't yet.
I just introduced myself, but I'll follow up with Tawaya right now.
Selena, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Felina Farley. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm in the Cleveland branch. And I guess what's going on right now here is fighting the redistricting and the gerrymandering here in Ohio. So.
I think next I see Dr. Jean Kennedy. Would you like to introduce yourself and pass it to someone?
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Jean. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll have my phone on mute after I introduce myself. I'm from the Fresno branch. I'm right now here in Atlanta, but I will be back in Fresno in the next few days. What else do we need to say? I think I'm thinking about peace right now in a time like this. So I'm looking forward to hearing what we have to say on our agenda today. And I'll keep myself muted. Peace, everyone.
Rebecca, we should really get started. There are 15 people. Is the sound, am I missing something?
We are starting. We're in the middle of introductions and welcomes. I was saving you for last as you requested.
I can't hear anyone.
Yeah, oh, okay. Can you hear me? So next, can we please have Rosa introduce yourself?
Sure. Sorry, I was having trouble with the mute button. So my name is Rosa Saavedra. I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm part of the Triangle branch. And, you know, the kind of the sentiment for today is out with the question, right? I've had this on my mind and in my heart since yesterday, and it's really about higher vibration. Just to, you know, be in that space of, you know, the spiritual traditions that unite us all. That's it.
Thank you. Do you want to pass it on to someone else, please?
What about you, Rebecca?
I went, thank you. I think left we have Ashley.
Ashley Carrington, Triangle branch, she, they pronouns. I'm feeling very tired today.
Thank you, Ashley.
And I'll pass it to John.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Sepulveda. I am with the Jane Addams branch. And the thing that keeps going in my mind is I'm praying for my friends and former colleagues in Ukraine and Belarus today. And I'm so sorry, I didn't pass it. I'm sorry. Melissa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Torres. Right now I'm calling from San Benito, Texas, right on the border with Mexico. And that's all that's been on my mind lately is borders. Sorry, I'll pass it to, I believe, Cece.
Yes, thank you so much. And hello to everyone. I'm Cece Anderson in Atlanta Metro Branch, and I'm just feeling overwhelmed with everything that's going on in this world today. And if we would just do unto others as you would have them to do unto you, we would have more peace and more love and understanding, clean water, and a good humanistic environment.
Thank you, Cece. Anita?
Good afternoon. My name is Danita Gibson Lloyd. I'm with the Fannie Lou Hamer branch in Columbus, Georgia. And today, as I finish grading about 250 papers of the soldiers that I teach at Fort Benning, Georgia, and a class that's mandated through the Department of Defense for personal finance, I just recall looking in the faces of these soldiers as I stood before them, soldiers as young as 17 years old. These are my sons, and I could not even begin to share with them what was taking place as directed by a drill sergeant, because these soldiers have been insulated from the news of the basic war that's about to take place. And so I looked into their faces and just continued to silently pray. Since 2009, I've instructed soldiers and have taught about 80,000 soldiers here at Fort Benning, Georgia. And my heart is just tight across my chest as I'm thinking that these young men, these sons of ours, will be deployed and go in the face of danger in what inevitably looks like World War III. And so my heart is heavy, but my prayers are strong, and I appreciate the work that we're doing here with this organization. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who has not introduced themselves?
Well, Teresa Elamine, Fannie Lou Hamer branch, and I'm so glad that my daughter, Danita Gibson Lloyd, could join us. She calls me Mama T. I am by far the oldest person in our branch, and I was hoping that Destiny, who is a 28-year-old mom, could get on. She and I have a meeting a little bit later because Danita, Destiny, and other members of the steering committee of the branch are all working in a project we call Strong Parental Involvement in Community Education. And it's mainly working with low-income women who live in public housing and other areas of the city who have children in elementary school. So this is the work that gives me my joy. Thank you.
Teresa. Did we have anyone else who, before we introduce Joy? Did everyone else go? Okay. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Joy Messiah, who is the president of WILF International, and Melissa Torres will be supporting her through this discussion. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and please take it away.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I'm really honored to be in your midst tonight, Nigerian time. And I look forward to the conversations that will happen this afternoon, this evening. Sorry, my brain is somehow a little bit tired. So Melissa, how do we go? You want to set the tone for the conversation?
I'll leave it up to you. I just want to share with everyone, Joy is our first Black president and African woman who is president of the International Board of WILF. Something that I had spoken about with Rebecca that I'd really like to support the Black Liberation Caucus with, and also with Teresa, is supporting the connections, the international connections to the international board, to the international secretariat, and hopefully to our sisters in the different African sections or in the diaspora, the African diaspora across other regions as well, not just in the African region. But I thought it'd be a good opportunity for Joy to speak here and, you know, and see how we can better support. Since I'm here in the US, it might be a little bit easier, you know, for me to help support her role in communicating with the Black Liberation Caucus. So I want to offer that and extend it as well to the group. So yeah, Joy, however you want to go ahead and share, please feel free.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll make it very conversational, and I'll basically be leveraging on my experience in wealth, in the African region, in Nigeria, and also on the international board, looking at how we can use our voice for engagement. And I will start with the basic thing by saying, one thing that works for me is a simple principle, and that is seek to understand before being understood. And I would really like to explain this further. It will really form the foundation of what I'm going to be sharing tonight. Now, one of the things I experienced when I joined WILF in 2007 was a feeling of overwhelm. On the lack of understanding of the structure, how it works, and how I can positively use my, in that time, I said my known voice to engage, to create a difference, and also to influence. Now, I then decided to use just a very simple strategy to understand how WILF functions, really looking at how I can adapt some of the international programs at that time to my local context, and also looking for pathways of engaging to create a difference. And I was very intentional about the process. Now, at this time where we are in WILF, we have really expanded. In African region, we've really grown from just being DRC and Nigeria as the two very active African countries. We now have almost 13 active African countries, groups, and then, you know, this has really been as a result of very intentional engagements. Now, how can we really use that? How can we really adapt that with the WILF US Black Liberation Caucus? Because I'm really proud of the work that is being done. Yes, we need to also understand that there's been historic racism in WILF, partly because of a strong Western feminist background. And this is the time for us to create a difference using a non-violent communication strategy, looking at how we can change how we've been doing things over the years. Also looking at how we can close the intergenerational gap that currently exists in the leadership of WILF. And I strongly believe that the time is now, and we have all that it takes to do that by leveraging on the connections we have. Like Melissa mentioned, how can we best support ourselves? How can WILF sections in Africa provide support to WILF US? How can WILF US also provide support? I see it as a mutually beneficial relationship. And how can we also work with Africans in the diaspora? How can we work with the International Secretariat better? How can we work with the international board to create the difference that we need? And I am so excited at the opportunity we have presently with the international program that is currently ongoing, with the organizational development process that is ongoing. I see this as very good opportunity for our voices to be heard and for us to create a difference. Now, this may not happen in, this is not something in my last 13, 14 years of being in WILF. This is the first time we've had this movement at this point. And I see it as something very strategic that we can really leverage on and ask ourselves, how can we understand the processes that are happening inside? And then how can we now use it to push our own agenda? Because the agenda we have really is the bigger agenda, which is the bigger vision which we'll have to make us a one organization movement, meaning that where everyone has the same rights, everyone can speak and everyone has an opportunity at a shot at the leadership, despite your skin color, despite your level, class, or whatsoever. We need to break that barriers within WILF. It's also important to note that WILF is a microcosm of the larger world. And the only difference that we would see in WILF is when we're very intentional about the way we engage, we look at the structures, we look at the power dynamics, and we are also very intentional at what we bring to the table. It's time for us to make the movement, very inclusive. And I think this is what the WILF US Black Liberation Caucus is doing is very timely. And I'm really very excited to be part of this process and honored to be in your midst today. I want to point out two key things I think we can really do moving forward. One is to look at intergenerational leadership. I think we need to be very, very intentional about grooming the next leaders for WILF. There's a huge gap. There's really a huge gap. And unconsciously, we find that tokenism is being practiced. So it's like, okay, we just want to give, we just want to create space without really understanding that it is a right and it's not a privilege to be given that space. It's our right to occupy that space. It's our right to be part of the movement. It's our right for to use our voices to create a difference. But the strategy in making this work is what we really need to focus on. How can we bring more young women, women of color? How can we bring them to the leadership of WILF? How can we also bring them to engaging very actively with the sisters across the world? Because when we talk about WILF International, sometimes we tend to think about just the board or the IS, but I want us also to think about the larger WILF sections across the world where we're situated. How can we better connect? How can we have strong collaboration? Like we all do know, collaboration is a new currency and it's creating a lot of difference on the ground and within processes. And just looking at how I've been able to walk through the structures, walk through the processes, for me is also very inspiring even to me. And I want to say that it hasn't been without its own struggle. It hasn't been without its own backlash. Melissa is, excuse me, Melissa is on the board with me and she understands very well some of the challenges we face on the board. And this is what we need to be very intentional. How can we change this moving forward? How can we have a truly representative board that speaks to the realities of members globally so that it really becomes an international board as it's meant to be, as the founding mothers meant it to be. I want to stop at this junction now. And Melissa, if perhaps you have a question you want to direct at me, or if you want us to open up for questions, I can now take it moving forward. That may be a little bit helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll only add to Joy's points about intergenerational leadership. It's something that we've really been trying to prioritize moving forward as we work on the IP, something that Joy and I especially have been pushing and mentioning. Hopefully working on proposals in the IP to come up with some sort of process where there is available mentorship. One thing I've seen in my work in trying to bring younger leaders, especially women of color, is that lack of mentorship, the expectation of you're at the table now it's your work, we need you to go do this, we need you to bring other women of color, and it's expected to come into like a place that's not safe. WILF has long been spaces that aren't safe for a lot of us. And so, Joy and I have seen that also at the international level. So I just want to add that I feel there's a lot of, like chasms across between sections, branches, international leadership in the offices and leadership in the streets and their regions. And I think we really need to start thinking of WILF in the US section, not just the work of WILF US, but WILF across the globe.
Thank you. Teresa?
Well, thank you, Rebecca. It is such an honor to have Joy and Melissa with us. And I'm glad that Melissa has rejoined the US section so that we can really work together. But since we're getting ready for the International Congress in July, I wanted to ask Joy what she thinks about the possibility that we could have a conflict resolution procedure that allows the US section and any other section to escalate our grievances to the International Board for resolution and remedies because we can't get anywhere in the US section with the current board. And we will have this board for the next 3 years. It has never been a board that is fully staffed. So you have 2 persons of color on a board of 7 people, which should be 12 people. But there's so many vacancies because people don't want to serve with the current leadership. So we have some very real grievances that I would like to see addressed at the international board level. Over.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for raising this. One of the commitments we have as the International Board members is to ensure that we have in place a draft conflict resolution mechanism that we can present at the upcoming Congress. And we're really, one of what we saw was the first global call we had, just to have a discussion and a feeler on what the thoughts around it is. There's going to be several more global calls. And then the processes for getting inputs and coming up with a draft will be made open. I've also received several inquiries from different sections as well, asking about the same thing. How can they get involved? And we really need to have one put in place. And I do really agree with you that until we have a very solid conflict resolution mechanism put in place as an organization, it's going to be very difficult for us to move forward, not just for WILF US, but even for WILF as a whole. We can see that playing out in different sections and even at the board. And this will be very, very important for us to have moving forward. So there's that strong commitment to have a draft that we can present to the board. And we do hope that once the process is made clear, currently we just had a global call. We're working with 2 consultants, Mignon and Jerisa, to put a skeleton in place, and that will be shared and input to the call. That for the timeline and all that processing will be made known.
Joy, can I share a little bit of that history from prior complaints filed with the board?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
And everyone, my internet gets glitchy. I'm on the border, so I'm sorry. I'm only turning on my video when I'm speaking. Just to give everyone a background, and speaking with Rebecca, I realized that there might not be an understanding of how governance has worked in the past or how the relationship with WILF US and international has been. The complaint that I shared in response to Teresa's complaints are very similar, and my experience is very similar to Teresa's, trying to build up younger leadership, specifically women of color, being a woman of color on the board. Several of us filing a complaint against the previous president. I want to be clear that that complaint was on the basis of racism, classism, and some ageism that a few of us faced against a specific person. The complaint was against a specific person in leadership. We submitted that before our Congress in Ghana. The way the international board was run was there was an executive committee of which Joy was on as vice president, if I'm not mistaken. So she was part of that executive committee, which was the president, 2 vice presidents, and a treasurer. And then every section had their own international board representative. I was the one for the US section. In Ghana, that governance changed. The international board, there's no longer an executive committee. There's now one international board, which is the president, Joy, 2 vice presidents, myself and Margareta, the treasurer, and then regional representatives. And the regions kind of follow the way the UN regionalizes. So Now you have a representative of the Americas, which is Beatriz, and the alternate Janet. And they're the ones who are supposed to liaise with all the sections and report, you know, what's going on, can help as a liaison to the IB. When we had done this complaint before, it was just the XCOM. So it was, you know, those four who were dealing with our complaint, reading it. And I'm sharing this for, first of all, to give the idea of how that governance has changed, and to give you an idea of how this has happened in the past, but also to stress that there was nothing in place and really nothing got done. It was reviewed by XCOM. A response was sent to leadership asking them to answer to all the allegations that we had, all the documentation that we kept, but there wasn't any kind of mediation or conflict resolution in place. So Joy has experienced that before by being on the XCOM and having that complaint come to her. And I have experienced it by being the person who sent that complaint and now being on the IB. Something that I've made clear is I'm not going to be part of an IB that doesn't deal with this the way it was done to us when we had the same complaint. I'm also sharing this to stress that it's not new. This happened before our complaint. It's happened since with Teresa. It continues to happen to other people. So even though we do need conflict resolution steps in place to deal with those interpersonal happening, that is definitely needed in a peace organization, but this is structural and we need to, conflict resolution isn't going to be the answer, you know, to a lot of the structural issues we have in place. And that's also stuff that we need to start changing, proposing changes, you know, that may be constitutional or to practice. And then again, supporting that leadership, that diverse leadership that has our same goals in place.
Thank you, Melissa. Anyone else have any questions or statements that you would like to add to this section? Shantae?
Hello. So what I'd like to add is I've spoken to different members of WILF US and I haven't experienced any blatant racism, but what I've experienced is more of defending why they're not racist. And so what that looks like is saying, like, if there's a complaint, instead of just addressing it and being accountable for how it lands over here to a brown or Black person, it's more of defending why they're not racist and defending a position. And for me, the experience of us as the Black Liberation Caucus not being heard, because if they were hearing us, then for us to even have to form the Black Liberation Caucus, it means that the brown and Black voices aren't being heard. So instead of listening, it's more of defending a position and not addressing that they may have generations of racism. So that's what's there for me.
Thank you, Shantae. Any other thoughts or comments or questions?
Hi, can you all hear me? This is Ashley Carrington.
Yes, thank you.
You'll have to bear with me. I'm very sick. I don't feel very well. But I did want to echo Teresa's sentiments with, I'm very concerned about how we can transform with the board that we presently have that's going to be there for 3 years. With the things that I personally have experienced, that I've seen others go through, I am gravely concerned for WILF, and I'm gravely concerned for the US branches, and I'm concerned for BLC because we are not being recognized in the way that we should. You know, as Shantae mentioned, it's a lot of pushback as to, I'm not racist, instead of an acknowledgement and an internal introspection. I literally spent an hour explaining to my own branch the BLC chart because they had questions and concerns about being branch partners. So I don't really know what can be done. I hope that we can generate something out of this, but I also feel a lot of this heavy lifting has to be done on the side of the people who are inflicting it. And that is where I believe that the most power comes from in terms of transforming WILF. They need to do the heavy lifting or leave. I'm sorry to be so candid and so frank, but that's essentially what is going to need to be done if this organization is going to survive. Over.
Thank you, Ashley. I see, John, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. As a member, I agree with everything Ashley said, and I think that the members of the board, how European countries and elsewhere in the world where and whether there's been any pushback to the fact that you are first leader, and I'm so glad you are. I want to make that clear as well. That I understand that we've had. And I'm curious how your own personal experience has been with that and how you've combated it if you've seen it.
Okay, thank you so much, John, for that question. And just to also say that I hear you, Ashley. I really also agree with you that the heavy lifting has to be done by the other side. And it's really important that is acknowledged. And I'm really hoping that by the time we have the next global call, that this will be done. And also to put out that there is also a conversation ongoing as to the possibility of really mediating within what is happening the Wolf US section. But we're looking at it to be sure that it wouldn't cause a distraction to the conflict resolution mechanism by the side. We want to make sure that we can have both processes running, or see if we can infuse it into the current process that we're running. So we've had it, and like Melissa mentioned, it's been there. It's been there for a long time, and it's really been a struggle to get a proper structural mechanism to addressing these issues. Back to your question, John, to say that my nomination was unanimous. So I want to believe that it signified that there was that collective appreciation for my leadership. And to say also that I've had a very good relationship with most of the European section, even before becoming the president, because I was also the international vice president for about 3 years and 1 year. 1 year because I stepped in when we lost a board member. I've been on the board for 6, 7 years now. I think 7 years, and I've had some experiences, mainly on the board, and not from all the members, from specific persons. And it got so messy, but we're able to resolve it to an extent that we can now work. But yes, it's been a struggle. But I don't want to believe that it's just because I was the president. I also want to believe that is part of the structural racism we have in Wolf, and which we urgently need to confront. We've left it to life for so long that a lot of persons have turned a blind eye to it and are living in denial. They do not see it and have refused to recognize that it exists. And so it's even creating much more problem, because most of the perpetrators are living in denial. And we need to come to a place where we have very frank conversation that racism is structural in Wolf. It's very systemic. And if we need to move forward, if we need to grow the movement, then we need to address it. So yes, I've experienced it firsthand. And I must say it's not a very pleasant experience. And even before, I remember the Congress I attended in Costa Rica. Was it Costa Rica? Yeah, I think it was Costa Rica. I had a first-hand experience, and it was during one of General Assembly, one of when we had the larger house meeting. And I wasn't even the one that responded. Some other sisters from the US, from some other European section responded to the individual, and she walked away from the venue. And she even stopped being part of WILP as a result of that situation. So it's been a nice experience having to work with diverse women, but then it's also been an eye opener it's been a different experience as a president from being a vice president. So I think maybe some persons are not used to or don't understand what it means to have a Black woman lead the organization. And I think it was like a shock, and it still is, there's still a lot of trying to get used to it. And that's why I think that we have a lot of work to do, especially the BLC. We need, this is where we have a very strong movement, and our African sisters as well. The conversation is on how can we close that gap? How can we, on our own part, do what we need to do while also holding the rest of the sections accountable to how the leadership of WILF evolves? There has to be that question: who are we accountable to as an organization? How can we ensure that we're very inclusive? So, John, I do hope that this answers your question. If it doesn't, please let me know if there are some areas you want me to provide some more clarity on. Thank you.
I just want to say I really respect that answer, and I really appreciate the fact that you're working of your work. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments for this section? If not, then Joy, there was I'm going to take my facilitator hat off and put myself on stack and make a comment. Joy, I heard you saying that this is structural and systemic, and I would wholeheartedly agree. And I was wondering if there was a process or if there was something, a conversation that could be had at the International Congress stating this and starting those frank conversations, or maybe even beforehand. Is there a process in place? Is there a committee? Is there a place where these frank conversations can begin?
Yes, we've had that conversation among some members of the board, and also the consultants that we have that is helping us out with organizational development has pointed that out, that this is a very frank conversation we need to have. And we are planning to ensure that there's a space for that conversation to happen during the Congress. But we also know that because of the way the Congress is going to run this year, which will provide some limitations. So we want to make sure that conversation starts happening even before the Congress. As you may be aware, the Congress this year may really be virtual, and with some regional consultations happening, which will feed into the larger Congress. So bearing that in mind, it also poses limitations as to how much time we have, unlike the flexibility we would have in an in-person Congress. So we are also looking at how can we kickstart conversations. That is how we started with the global call. So in looking at some of the conflict processes, we are also going to look at some of the triggers. And of course, we know that racism is one of the issues that we've been presented with that we need to deal with as an organization, and that's this racism. And we can't hide behind the shadows anymore. At this time, we need to really come forward and deal with it. And I think this is going to happen, and conversations will be much bolder than they used to be in the past.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Putting facilitator hat back on, and Teresa.
Thank you, Rebecca. Well, Joy, in December of 2020, you spoke in a well-attended webinar on Africa. And because of the lack of cultural competency and relationships in the Disarm in Wars Committee, we were never able to advance the work. But now that we have the Black Liberation Caucus, I would plead with you to connect us with sections in Africa that are dealing with Africa, because now that we seem to have a widely spreading war in the European section. We know that there's quite a bit going on in Africa due to the US messing around in Africa, China messing around in Africa. So I saw this meeting today as an important with 18 sections in Africa. And so if you could say a little bit about AFRICOM and what the sections in Africa are dealing with, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Teresa, for the comment and the question. And to say yes, I would be willing. We have the regional rep, Sylvie, and I think she was also on that meeting. And I would put you in touch with her. She would be in the best position to link up sections as she works. Like Melissa mentioned, with the new governance structure we have regional reps who liaises directly with the sections on the work they do, and also to give information to the IB. So Sylvia would really be in the best position to do that. And it's not a problem since she was in that meeting, and I can also as well connect. And I'm sure she'll be very happy to get some African sections on board. Yeah, you rightly noted that there's a lot happening. Even with the most current Ukraine crisis, with Ukraine-Russia crisis, we're also looking at how it affects Africa, knowing that we import over 70% of the wheat that we use for bread in Africa from these countries. And we do know what the poverty is like, but also the potentials resident within the continent. Africa, it's been a very political process. Some African countries outrightly rejected having American boots on the soil. Initially, it was supposed to be like they wanted to situate a site in Nigeria. The government refused. Some other neighboring African countries refused. But there's still a strong collaboration in terms of training and all of that happening. And the shadow overt operations that do happen with some of the ongoing conflicts, especially in the regions where we see mineral resources. It's always been an attraction for the US. So usually you wouldn't have the US soldiers in countries where they don't have an interest. And oil companies that follow, that comes with their interventions, and some of the very some of the huge disregard for the human rights of the indigenous people that happen. But I think it's a conversation that we can have with the different sections, because the context really varies from Nigeria to Cameroon to DRC to Zimbabwe, Kenya. The conversation, the context is really very different. It's not a one-size-fits-all conversation. And so it may be nice to have that deeper conversation with Sylvie and see how we can bring the different sections on board and have them speak to their very specific context. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Joy. That's wonderful news. And if you could stay on for the Black Liberation strategy chart, you'll see how this strategic objective is connected within our work for the BLC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I would have really loved to stay, but unfortunately it's almost 11 p.m. right here. And I would have to leave very soon.
Yes. Thank you so much, Joy. It's been such an honor to have you here. And I know it's getting so incredibly late for you. So we want to honor your time. If there are any other questions for Joy or any other statements before she jumps off. See you celebrating hand claps. Wonderful. Thank you, John. And did you want to say something? Okay, it was just hand claps. Okay. Thank you. Yes. giving you a raise in the roof. Thank you so much for joining us, Joy.
Thanks a lot. It's really an honor to be here, and I do hope that we'll have more opportunities of doing this. And just say thank you. It's been an interesting conversation, and I do hope that in the nearest future I can stay through for the meeting to really participate. But if there's anyhow I can, support better, please do let me know. And I'll be keeping you updated on the conflict resolution process that will be going on. And if there's any other thing you think we need to talk about or we need to include in the ongoing OD process, please do let Melissa know, or you can bring it directly to my attention. Thank you so much.
I'll stay on the call and share information with Joy when we meet later on as well, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Joy. Excellent. Teresa?
Well, it's just about the person on the iPhone, but I do want to say how great it is, Melissa, that you were able to arrange this important connection with our president from the International Board. I just really am so appreciative that we were able to have this conversation. But who is the person on the iPhone? I just have some real security issues about Zoom when people have not identified themselves as someone on an iPhone. Who exactly is that?
It's me. I'm Destiny Wallace from Columbus, and you were Humor Branch. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, my children are in the background.
I am so glad, Destiny, that you made it. Well, that's another member of the Fannie Lou Hamer branch. So there are 3 of us on the call today. Thank you so much, sweetheart, Destiny. And I'll see you when you come by a little later.
Yes.
But I understand why you're muted, because I know Josiah and Elena are having a great time, right, in the car.
Right. Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you so much. This is being recorded, so we can share the recording as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking the time. I know our agenda, we went way over, but I think that was such an important opportunity to get to speak with the International Board. And Melissa, again, thank you so much for helping organize this. We are going to move on to the Advancing Human Rights Committee and the Disarm Committee. So updates from our members. The first update was on the Advancing Human Rights Committee. Was there a person who was going to speak to this?
Well, I can speak to it because Joan and I had a kind of rehabilitation relationship meeting on this past Thursday, February 24th, just to try to get clear about her plans to release the role of chair. And she and I have emailed back and forth quite a few times since Thursday, and she is eager to allow Ashley and some other person, I think she said possibly in the Cape Cod branch. So Ashley can speak to this possibility of her being co-chair. I know when we have our meeting on Monday evening for the full AHR meeting, Joan felt because she was so slow in getting out the information that we could not make any real decisions. But we are pretty clear about who the conveners of the subcommittees are. I'm the convener of 2 subcommittees, the subcommittee and the UN Decade for People of African Descent / reparations. So I convene both those 2 subcommittees, and that's really the only role I want to play in the Advancing Human Rights Committee. But as I understand it, Ashley is a #1 candidate for one of the co-chairs. So perhaps she could speak to that.
Thank you, Teresa. Ashley?
Hi, yes. So to be clear, at the time that we were trying to discuss what was going to happen with the entire AHR committee, myself and 2 other individuals were talking about the idea of being tri-chairs, as we were all different age ranges, different demographics, and thought it would be a good fit because the committee was so broad and has so many subcommittees. That was one conversation. We have had numerous meetings since that time, and those 2 individuals actually have no longer been showing up when we have been meeting for AHR. I was called by Donna Peel yesterday to ask if I would co-chair with her as for AHR. I do not personally want to be the co-chair, and I do not personally believe AHR needs 2 co-chairs. I think that the leadership within all of the subcommittees can work together to put together the agenda, communicate issues, because essentially when we're meeting, all we're doing is getting updates from the subcommittees. And so my proposal was that the subcommittee conveners take turns being the facilitators for the meetings, following up on any correspondence, putting together the agendas, doing essentially what Joan is doing, just passing that through the people who are already leading these committees. I'm not sure why we need to look outside because we already have the people doing the work inside. And again, when we actually meet as one committee, all we're doing is getting updates and seeing if there are any other issues that need to be delegated to the subcommittees. So as far as co-chair, it's a no for me, dog. And I'm going to make sure in the future, I'm very clear about that. I know we are not there yet, but my biggest reason is because of my experience with Disarm and the membership and WILF where it stands. Over.
Thank you, Ashley. Was there any other update from this committee or comments?
As a longtime WILF member, I do know that all issue committees submit themselves.
I got it.
I appreciate what Ashley is saying, but the work that Joan is doing is a kind of overall coordination. And that role really needs to be replaced. So perhaps Donna is willing to take it on, but it does mean sending out the notices to all of the members of AHR. Sometimes people are in an issue committee, but they would not be in this subcommittee structure. They're just simply kind of at-large members. And I think the number is up to like 40 people. And the email that Joan sent me yesterday, that the AHR discussion list she set up, which was a one-way list, only she was posting to it. She's saying that now she will open up the list so that all of us will have equity and inclusion inside of the listserv. So we cannot be without an overall coordinator. I had thought I wanted to do that role, but after all of the drama with Joan, I decided not to. And so I was elated when the 3 women, Ashley and the other women, decided they would be tri-chairs. But there is no way for an issue committee to function without at least one chair, because that person coordinates the meetings, brings us together, sends out the Zooms and all of that. And that is not something that can be rotated. Now, we can certainly rotate the facilitation. I don't mind facilitating a meeting. We do the meetings once a month, and I don't mind being in the rotation. But as far as the overall coordination is concerned, that requires a specific person who holds the title of chair or co-chair, specific person or person. So I'm sorry, Ashley, your suggestion is just not doable, in my opinion, based on what I know about how the issue committees work. Over.
Thank you. I see George is on the stack.
Sure. I want to say yes and to Teresa and Ashley. It's more than just facilitating the meeting, as Teresa spelled out. But I also think that what's not there yet that we need is the overall vision and holding that vision that connects the work and helps to propel it forward. I'm not that person. I don't have that kind of vision consistently, but I know it's missing. And that's beyond just coordinating and sending out the agendas. It's holding the vision of the work and coordinating. And yes, like Teresa, I'm not opposed to facilitating a meeting every 3 or 4 meetings or so, but I couldn't do anything else at this point in terms of trying to step up to be a chair of a committee. And I want to share, in terms of the Racial Justice Committee, a disappointment that a person who was at our last Racial Justice Committee, Ian, is not here. And I want to raise one of the issues that he raised and encourage everyone to watch the racial justice recording at about minute 14 or a little bit after. Ian, whose last name I can't pronounce correctly, who is in Las Vegas and who is an Indigenous man, talked to us about a number of atrocities, environmental atrocities caused by continued weapon testing, past weapon testing, taking over Indigenous lands to do weapon testing, even now, and trying to stop that. So I just want to raise the issue so it's on the record, and look at the racial justice recording about 14 minutes in. I sent the recording to everyone on the Black Liberation Caucus list. If you don't have it, email me and I will send you a link. Pass.
Thank you, George. So since Ian's not here, I would say we should table the subcommittee conversation. Are there any other questions, updates, or comments on Advancing Human Rights Committee?
I put my comment in the chat, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you. Teresa is saying each of the subcommittees should have its own issue committee. However, the structure Joan has set up is that Advancing Human Rights is a collection of subcommittees. If there are no other questions, comments, or statements on Advancing Human Rights, I'm going to move to the Disarm and Ad Hoc committees. In this section, we will receive updates from John and Ashley. John, I believe you were going first.
Rebecca, you misread what I wrote in the chat. I said that each of the subcommittees could be their own issue committee, but the structure is set up so that AHR is a collection of subcommittees. And we operate with a great deal of comfortable because I convene the 2 committees, subcommittees. I convene with a great deal of autonomy, as do the other conveners. And so I don't want it to be misunderstood. We are a collection of subcommittees under the AHR umbrella, not that we should be separate. I accept the structure that Joan has set up. Just to be clear, I can live with it, but we do need an overall chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Teresa. Melissa, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, again, just to share really quickly some history, we've faced this before. when I proposed the immigration committee at the Chicago Triennial of 2016 or 2017, it was proposed as its own committee. It was then moved under Advancing Human Rights. This was important to us because we were really pushing for and started that committee as being led by those of us who are from families of immigrants or immigrants ourselves. Under Advancing Human Rights, it's whoever that co-chair is. So this is something that's come up in the past, and it's, you know, maybe something that should be looked at structurally over who does what's seen as legit and who's representing us in those committees. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Any other comments for Advancing Human Rights before we move on to disarm? Okay, John, I believe you are up. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I want to make it clear that I'm speaking about my experience as a member in Disarm. Some in this group may know me for my professional capacity in WILP, and to be clear, as of this moment, I no longer retain that capacity. I have resigned from WILP because I believe that key leaders are enabling the systemic dysfunction that is plaguing this organization. I believe white supremacy is alive and well throughout the organization. And while I do not think it is the only factor contributing to the distress the organization finds itself in, white supremacy is the key factor in limiting the organization and suppressing the voices of members such as yourself. I also understand that some might be expecting me in this space to present a report based on my professional work. And as I've told many in this organization, including members who are on the phone with me, I have been in the process of doing a SWOT analysis of internal and external communications in WILP. I've conducted about 100 and some odd interviews with current and former WILP members, examined the history of the organization, and did a complete electronic media audit of WILP materials. And I can't in good conscience finish that as a paid employee, so I will be finishing that as a volunteer, and I will be making sure that that report is delivered not just to the board, but to BLC. And I want to let everyone know, because I have spoken with some people in this meeting about their experiences, and I know they know that I hear you, I believe you, and it is really appalling what I've seen throughout the organization, particularly in leadership. Finally, when this report comes out, I will make myself available to BLC to answer any questions they have. That report will come in the next 3 weeks. So again, just to be very clear, this is about my volunteer experience on Disarm. I was encouraged so the first thing is to know is that in my professional capacity, I was encouraged almost immediately to begin the work of some volunteer projects as well. I didn't have a problem with that. It was represented to me at the time that because I was a man and because there had been other male contractors who had come in, and based on the experience that I've heard from women in the group, they have been berated and bullied by previous male contractors, and so there was a great amount of skepticism when I joined. I can understand that. I also understand that WILP is a safe space for women. Although I wish that was the case, that it was a safe space for all women. It is not. And almost immediately, because of my experience, which I will sum up this way, and I have some notes, so I'll be referring to them as I kind of go. To elaborate a little bit on my experience and not to make it too long at all, I was an investigative journalist for many years. I covered disinformation and white nationalism, not just in the US, of which, you know, I won many awards, and at one point was even subpoenaed by the US government to speak about what I knew, but also in Europe. So I've been following this for the past 10 years. And in 2018, I was asked by folks in Belarus to come and attend a symposium that got me involved with the very groups that find themselves at the center of armed conflict today. So I'm bringing that experience. I also know that based on my work and my research and my professional life, that there is a very strong nexus between Vladimir Putin, the Russian government, and a global nationalist movement that is built on white supremacy. You see allies like this in Viktor Orban of Hungary, Donald Trump here in the United States, and throughout even in the Latin world, we see that Russia has helped, for example, fund Buddhist national groups in Myanmar to oppress the Rohingya minority there. So this is something that I know a lot about. And almost immediately on joining Disarm, I was encouraged not to talk about my experiences and perspectives. And at first it was suggested for the same reason that I was told to volunteer, was that the reason that my perspective was not welcome was because I was a man and that women were not really interested in hearing from me. And I was okay with that because I had hoped that, you know, Disarm would have the conversation that they needed to have. But what began happening was I began seeing massive amounts of Russian propaganda on the Disarm listserv. And most of it came from a really small group of people who seemed to be pushing this. And I identified it. I showed Disarm through the listserv and other things that this is propaganda, this is where it comes from, this is what we have to be careful about, because at the end of the day, the worldview that Vladimir Putin and others who are like-minded, including Donald Trump here in the United States, in my opinion, they advocate for a worldview that does not include anyone who happens to find themselves on this call today. As soon as I started doing that, I immediately got a lot of pushback. And at first it was because I was a man and I didn't know what I was talking about. And then after it became clear that not only did I understand what was happening, and at least based on my experience, and that I knew quite a few folks over there and was sending messages from them, that I was told I was being too emotional when I brought up this nexus between this global white nationalist movement, the desire to stop the environmental movement, which is tied up in this, so that there can be a maintenance of power based on oil and gas. I was immediately ridiculed by members. I was dismissed because of my gender. I was told that I was being too emotional. I was seeing racial issues where they do not exist in regards to Putin's policies. And at one point, one member of Disarm actually called me a CIA agent. And this happened while I was trying to reconcile with them because they consistently were pushing propaganda that was not just dangerous to the group and how they shaped their decisions, but also was anti-LGBTQ and anti-people of color. So eventually what happened is, as I kept respectfully objecting to a lot of the things that were happening, I was placed on the working group that was drafting the statement. And another member told me that the only reason I was allowed on the drafting working group was because I was seen by certain members of leadership as being a, quote, good minority member, and that my inclusion on the working group would help take out the air of claims, take the air out of the claims by BLC and others, that they were being shut out of the Ukrainian discussion. I asked Ariane DeLu directly about this after I heard this, and she told me, quote, that is an upside, but that is not the only reason. She told me then it would be better if I was seen at meetings, but not that I didn't talk as much. And I asked her point blank if that meant I should be seen and not heard, and she said yes. While this was going on, I was working with the drafting working group on a statement. I want to make it very clear, I value and respect and admire those in the group who initially drafted the statement. We've become, I would consider us very good friends. And we wrote a statement together that clearly identified the white supremacy underpinning Russian policy and also acknowledged institutional white supremacy in the United States and how that was affecting the response, i.e. the buildup of military options. Which I personally do not think is okay, but that's another point. When we released this draft statement, it also, I also want to make something else. This draft statement focused on women and children, and as well as those environmental and natural resources issues that that I mentioned earlier. And it was a statement that even though we were coming from different perspectives, we all thought was very, very good. And we were all very proud of it. When we released this statement to the group, we got an urgent message from Darian DeLu herself. She said she was extremely concerned about the tenor of the message and expressed to me privately that it was too anti-Putin and too anti-Russia. When I explained that Putin was the global leader of the white Christian nationalist movement and that he trained Americans and others who support white supremacy of the Russian imperial movement based in St. Petersburg, and that his government had flooded misinformation and inflamed tensions in Ferguson during the aftermath of killing Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor, and so many others, and that he was supported by the leaders of the white Christian nationalist movement, both here and abroad, she told me it sounded too far-fetched and that I seemed paranoid. She also told me there was no world where Putin would invade Ukraine. Obviously, this conversation happened before Putin invaded Ukraine. The president also told me that she had heard from other members from the pro-Putin camp and that we needed to work with them on the issues. And this restarted the entire draft process. And ultimately, the state became so bloated and obfuscated that it lost any meeting. I raised my concerns that no one from BLC was on the committee while the draft process. So when Darian said, we need to redo this draft process, I said, okay, great. That gives us an opportunity to bring someone in from BLC. And she said, no, I think that's too much. I don't think that that's something we needed to do. Ultimately, I was able to get her and some other members outside of our working group to agree to let Ashley, who's on the call, read it. And Ashley reviewed that statement, and she can speak directly to what she saw in that statement by the time I got it to her. After Ashley reviewed this, what I would describe as a Frankenstein statement, other members of Disarm started offering critiques as well. One member was upset that I shared a TikTok from a Black American woman. And the reason I'm mentioning her color is because it's directly related to what she said. This member, who has a direct pipeline to the president and is someone who has, complained about me and my focus on color, told me that she didn't understand this woman whose TikTok I had sent around, and also that she disagreed with her. And I asked her how she could come to disagreement with something she couldn't understand. And she said to me, it's Black speak. So I know what she's saying, even if I don't know what she's saying. Another woman of the group participated in a workshop, repping herself as part of WILP US in this workshop, in which it was discussed about how to redirect criticisms of Russia on LGBTQ issues. Others on that call were members of a white separatist movement, and in fact had the white separatist flags displayed on their Zoom. The call was hosted and organized by a group that has acknowledged taking Kremlin money through the Russia Today propaganda machine, which, for everyone to know, has just been banned by the entire EU this morning for spreading false propaganda. I'm going to take this member's word that she was unaware of the company she was keeping. I'm not going to name her today, but I did think it was very ironic that someone who had told me so often that I did not know what I was talking about did not know she was going to an anti-queer, pro-Russia meeting that also included white nationalist separatists on that call. Meanwhile, the comments in the Disarm listserv, while this statement was going back and forth, devolved to the point where many others started chiming in, offering anti-LGBTQ and particularly anti-trans views, sending messages from white nationalist and Fox News host Tucker Carlson saying that he is right on the issues of Russia and the United States, and sending false information blaming the invasion of Ukraine on the Ukrainian government themselves. They claim that the government had been infiltrated by Nazis. And I brought up the fact that this point that the Ukrainians are somehow Nazis is actually a very potent brand of Russian propaganda. And for the record, there is a small volunteer, and I want to make this clear, volunteer brigade that calls themselves Nazis in the Donbass. They say they are fighting on behalf of Ukraine. In reality, and this has been verified by folks from the Atlantic Council and others, the commander of this brigade was trained at the Russian Imperial Movement headquarters in St. Petersburg, and that volunteer brigade in Russia-controlled territory has no linkage with the government in Ukraine. And in fact, the Ukrainian president is Jewish himself and had members of his family killed in the Holocaust. So this whole idea that we are fighting Nazis, or pardon me, that Russia is trying to fight Nazis and therefore we shouldn't fight them, is something that is pervasive.
John, can I interject really
Sure.
quickly? Would you be able to wrap up in a few moments? Because I want to make sure we can get to everything on the agenda. I apologize, we went over with the first section.
I apologize about the long nature of this, but I wanted to be clear because I don't really plan on, you know, I've told people I will be members to support the women who are in this group, and so I will remain a member. But honestly, it makes me sick. All of this makes me really sick. The bottom line is this. Only after I sent an email saying that after raising my concerns, now I heard from leadership. I've heard from them all this weekend. They've been calling me, emailing me. They're desperately concerned to see whether I'm going to say other things that I know. And I just want to say that y'all are just right. And what I saw in Disarm is beyond disappointing. So I wish I could say something more poignant or what have you, but I literally feel sick to my stomach. And it's very sad. It's very, very sad because we still don't have a statement out. They're still going back and forth on these issues. And at the crux of it is, at the center of this is, you know, as other people have pointed out, what looks like the beginnings of World War III and all the rest. So I'm not going to educate anyone anymore. I didn't mean to, but that was my experience. And if Ashley wants to add anything about the statement and her involvement, I'd be happy to hear from her.
Thank you so much for sharing, John. I know that wasn't easy, so I appreciate you taking the time and being here with us this evening. Ashley?
Rebecca, if it's okay, I'll do my comments on the statement and ad hoc in one so that we can keep moving through the agenda, if that's okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Ash.
Sure. So to follow up with what John was saying about the statement, he reached out to me because he thought it would be good, you know, as he mentioned, to have someone from BLC to take a look at what was being said, since we essentially were boxed out of even being involved in the process. By the time the statement got to me, it was a complete monstrosity. The tone didn't even flow as if it had been written by one individual. It was so segregated, you know, in terms of the issues that were raised, and there were clear shifts in messaging within the piece itself. It was honestly something that really should not have been sent out, especially if it's going to be representative of an organization such as WILF. And I tried my best to kindly convey that to the members who were involved. I later found out that those members who were involved in drafting the original statement were actually stepped on by these individuals that John had brought up. And so a lot of that language had come from their feelings and editing of the statement. And so I was thanked for my feedback, but they were, you know, uninterested in changing it and were going to allow the statement to stand. I felt that whole process was, one, inefficient in terms of how quickly things were progressing, and we were all watching the news, seeing how things were going. And two, it was an intentional step to make sure that voices were not heard. And those voices were the ones pushing against what's going on and pointing the finger where it needed to be pointed. So for me, it was multi-layered in terms of problematic with how the speed, the time, the tone, the way it was carried out, these people who can intervene at the last minute after something's been drafted and make all these changes. So it wasn't a great experience. I felt very condescended to in the emails that followed about, we're so happy that someone from BLC reached out. A few members did email me independently of the email thread to say those things, but I did feel they were extremely disingenuous because they were followed up with, you know, we feel very strongly in support of what we've put out. Well, so that was the statement. Moving on to ad hoc. I was a part of the ad hoc committee to submit a plowshares proposal, the RFP plowshares proposal on behalf of WILF. The process as it was originally described, the committee was led by Cheryl Spencer. We would all come up with ideas. After we brainstormed those ideas, we would find which ideas were the most feasible. Whoever brought those ideas would then take those ideas and create a concept note. That concept note would be looked over by the group. Any changes or additions that the group felt, would make it beefier or better would be adjusted. And then the concept note itself would be sent off to an independent vetting committee in order to make sure that it was in line with, the principles of WILF, and we wanted to make it was representative of WILF. All of this, even though we are an entire ad hoc committee, was handled by Cheryl. She was the deciding factor. She was the one who made the decision between which proposals were selected. And she was also one of the biggest impediments and reasons why my proposal was not submitted through WILF. I came up with 3 separate ideas. I asked everyone to give me their feedback on which ideas that were best in terms of WILF. And that was the idea that I would be forming a concept note to submit through WILF. They did not know that I was submitting the other 2 independently. I did not feel they needed to. My concept note and all of my ideas were often met with micro-invalidations, microaggression, questions about my ability and capacity to execute all of the ideas that I had created myself and knew how to do. And there were often times where if I was in a different committee meeting and Cheryl was also in that meeting and we were discussing something that somehow got to that topic, that she would go out of her way to step on my proposal and bring up hers and the similarities between the two, even though at that time the proposal I was submitting was no longer art-based. One of the 3 was, I decided not to submit that one because she was submitting one that dealt with art as well. I finished my proposal. It was supposed to be uploaded to a Google Drive in which the vetting committee had access to. And a part of that committee was Dee Murphy, Jennifer Bailey. I think Rebecca, if I'm not mistaken, you were a part of that vetting committee. No? Okay. There were 3 more people who were going to be involved in the vetting process that Cheryl picked. Again, I can't give you all the names because she was the one who determined all of this, even though we are an ad hoc committee. And so she reached out to me and said, I think your proposal needs some more work. You need to change the language, this and that. Mind you, Dee Murphy had already looked at my proposal and it had already also been sent to some other members of BLC to see. I told her that at this time I was fine with how the proposal was. It fit all of the requirements as required by Plowshares because I attended their webinars for the information on how to do that properly, and it was going to stand. She said, okay. I did not hear from Cheryl for almost a full week. And then the day before everyone's proposals are supposed to be submitted, she emails me asking if mine is ready yet because she has already sent the other proposals ahead to the vetting committee, which was not the process that was set out. And I asked her why she sent the other proposals and held mine and did not go upload to the Google Drive as we all in the committee had decided. She informed me that there were a lot of things going on and she didn't have time to fuss with technology, which was confusing to me because I thought she was a scientist, but okay. So I told them that I would be withdrawing my proposal, after which I started receiving emails and calls from people asking why. At that time, I did not inform them that I was still going to be submitting independently. But within the whole experience of Disarm, the issues around the underlying white supremacy and racism were on display. And because I was one of the only members of color who was consistently at meetings and whose proposal was selected, that left me as one of the maybe 3 or 4 people who was consistently meeting with the committee. And at every meeting, I was shut down, not allowed to speak, and looked at as confrontational while it was Cheryl who was being condescending and disrespectful. I honestly have no interest in chairing any more committees. Right now, cultural arts is what I'm going to be pushing my focus on, and BLC. But within the entire Plowshares process, it was an internal nightmare. So much so that two other people who were going to submit just stopped coming to meetings because they didn't have the capacity to deal with the false bureaucracy that was being puppeted at these gatherings. As I mentioned, I did submit my own proposal. It is not affiliated with WILF. I submitted independently. But the fact that our proposal from WILF for plowshares and for the entire purpose was for it to have an equity and inclusion aspect. And the proposals that are being submitted are from white women who have nothing in their proposals has anything to do with what if RFP is asking for this round. So I honestly would hope that next year, or if the opportunity comes around, that BLC itself in a way can submit, because I do not foresee, especially if Cheryl is at the head of it, an ad hoc committee functioning well in that way again. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for sharing your experience. Any comments, questions, or statements? Teresa.
Well, when I found out that Cheryl was running the process, I declined to participate from the get-go, because I know what was gonna be like. But I would just say that Ashley has shown integrity and transparency, because we actually saw Ashley's proposal at the January meeting of the BLC, and we were told by Ashley and Dee that Cheryl and Odile did not want their proposals sent out. And now that the concept notes have all been put out, we still have not seen proposals from Cheryl and Odile that are representing the US section of WILF. It is lacking in integrity, and I say borders on being unethical, because the Fannie Lou Hamer branch proposal submitted by the Southern Anti-Racism Network, which is a 501c3, and we're the fiscal sponsor for the Fannie Lou Hamer branch. The Plowshares concept note that George and I put together that was submitted on the 15th. We got confirmation that they have it, but in some conversations with the program officer at Plowshares, they are aware of this drama. So it could hurt all the proposals that are coming out of WILF. And so even though Ashley submitted her proposal independently, I'm sure it is well known by them that she's a WILF member, as is it known that Odile is a WILF member, that Cheryl is a WILF member, and I am a WILF member, which is why I asked the question at the February session, can more than one proposal from a single organization be considered? And the answer was yes. So I know that Ashley's proposal, which in essence has been embraced by all of WILF as genius, and the need for us to have that art and cultural aspect in our work, which I support 100%. So I hope that they will fund her proposal. But the $50,000 proposal from the Southern Anti-Racism Network, which mentions the BLC at the end of it, I do believe, in the struggle that we are waging, because I didn't want to hide anything from the Plowshares folks, because the way these foundations work, they call around asking about proposals. I get calls all the time, and I asked quite a few people to submit proposals. So I'm sure that Plowshares will call me at one point and ask me about the Nuclear Watch South proposal, which is a collective, and they would have identified me as having told them about the proposal. So this is serious business at this point. But in the spirit of full disclosure, Madeline Reese has really embraced the grievances that I've been putting out. And thanks to Melissa, who has had this experience before, Madeline Reese, the International Secretariat, like the executive director of all of WILF International, she and I, Melissa and George, are going to be meeting. I believe the date is March 16th. So my main goal is to try to consolidate some of the grievances so we get to a point where we can get the kind of support at the international level, since we're moving through this process of getting to the International Congress in July. And because of these meetings we're having monthly, the Denmark session, New Zealand, Australia, they all know about the problems of white supremacy that we're having in the US section. So it's become quite an embarrassment to Darian and her board, such as it is. So I just wanted people to have that information. And I'll stop to see if there are any questions. Over.
Thank you, Teresa. Ashley, I see your hand.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that there is concern, as Teresa mentioned, because Jenny Allen, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, the membership manager has been in contact with me after that one WILF call, the conflict call, and they are saying that they are taking steps to examine what's going on here and try to figure out that process through these one WILF calls, and as Joy mentioned, earlier. But I still stand firm on, there are members of the exec board that need to step down. When you have leadership that's using personal attacks and digging up information about you and attempting to spread that throughout the membership, that's a problem. And that comes from the top down. And so I'm honestly pushing for a way that BLC can make that happen before this 3-year term is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. John, I see your hand.
I just want to confirm what Ashley has said, that and this will be going in my report, but I have personally heard things about members who are on this call right now from the president and others of the board that were designed to poison the waters before I reached out to them. And the things that were said were completely inappropriate. The first time it happened, I thought, well, this is just, kind of stupidity on their part. The second time it happened, I go, well, that's weird. The third time it happened, fourth time, fifth time, seventh time, 12th time, it became very clear to me that anyone who was outside of what I call the sewing circle of leadership their ideas were not welcome, and they were dismissed before I even got to them. So I just want to validate what Ashley said, because it's absolutely.
I think you got cut off there, John. Were you finished?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other thoughts, comments, or statements on this section? And I acknowledge, Ashley, you are asking, and maybe we can put this for next month for discussion, a plan on how BLC can help pressure the current board to step down, which brings us to our 3-year strategic plan. Teresa, actually the next 2 sections were yours, and I'm seeing that we only have 15 minutes. I would like to ask you how you want to go about these next 2 sections.
Well, I would like for George to put up the strategy chart, because I think we can do it in 5 minutes. The key thing is to make sure we have the person who's facilitating. And just to jump ahead a little bit, I'm not sure if the Cape Cod branch has done a rotation yet. If not, they would be next in the rotation. Donna is not here, but we would go back to the beginning, which would put it in Dr. Jean Kennedy's hands, because they started the rotation. So that's a decision that needs to be made after I finish these two things. I am so sorry that Rosa had to leave, but could we move forward with the strategy chart? Because I really do have a hard stop at 6, if at all possible. I might could give it 2 more minutes, but we never do these meetings longer than 6 p.m. It's either 90 minutes or 2 hours max. And so I know it was an important meeting because we had joy and discussion, but we really need to close out soon. So George, can you make the strategy chart a little bit bigger? Because George, what we want to ask, because mostly everyone has seen the chart in a previous meeting, but it is updated regularly. So George, the question is on the allies and partners section of the chart, which I believe is the second column. The way that the allies were determined is based on mainly my experiences with them. So people I do not consider allies like Darian and Cheryl and all, they're not on here. But there may be some other allies, I would say, that in the Fresno branch, but I was leaving that up to Dr. Jean Kennedy. But I've been quite impressed with the integrity of, I think her name is Jane Slater. She's actually the assistant to Beatrice Schultes, and I've been so impressed at her fairness in meetings. But I wanted to leave that up to Dr. Jean to say whether or not she should be on the list of individual allies. So that's a question directly to you, Dr. Jean.
I think I heard a little bit of the question. You're asking about vetting someone from Fresno?
I'm asking specifically about Jane. She's the only person I know in the Fresno branch that I think should be on the allies list. And so the message
Well, it's been my experience that the ladies out of the Fresno branch tries to work as allies to the conversations that we have. So Jan is out of Fresno. Jan Slaughter, I think you may be speaking about. She's done quite a bit of work in the international part of the Wolf branch, the Wolf International section. So I acknowledge her as an ally, as I would any of the other ladies out of the Fresno branch. I don't know if that answers the question. I can speak for my ladies that are out of that branch.
George, could you add Jane? I think her name is Jane, Jane, and her last name. Somebody needs to mute themselves, Rebecca. I can't see who's not muted. George, is the noise coming from you, George?
It's not, and I can't both share the screen. Very good.
Well, who was the noise coming from?
It was from Dr. Kennedy. She still had her microphone open.
Oh, I'm sorry. Now that she's muted, we have the information we need. So George, could you add Jane? And I believe her last name is spelled Slagter. But maybe Dr. Jean can put it in the chat since she has a noisy background. And then we can move over to the activities column of the chart. George, what happened? The chart went away.
Nope, I'm still here.
But I don't see the chart.
I'm sharing my screen. I don't know. Can other people see?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, for some reason, oh, there it is. Okay. So George, there are quite a few activities on the chart, and February 27th today is our meeting. So all of the January stuff has been eliminated to keep making room for activities. And because the Fannie Lou Hamer branch has requested a $2,500 mini grant, I think we will actually get it. And so there are things here on the chart. And George, at some point, you could send out the chart to everyone. But the only thing I wanted to ask about was adding Jane from the Fresno branch, because the chart is being shared widely. Because the truth of the matter is, the Southern Anti-Racism Network and the Fannie Lou Hamer branch are already working the chart. And so the question for everyone here who's represented, who's representing a branch, which would be Ashley, Shantae, Cece, Danita, and I for the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, George and Shemaye for the Triad branch, and Rebecca for the Detroit branch, because the way our consensus is set up is based on representatives from branches. So Dr. Jean, Fresno, all of the branches I named. And the question is there any unreadiness in accepting the Black Liberation 3-year strategy chart as a work plan in development for the Black Liberation Caucus? So the floor is open for any objections or blocking concerns, because this is a question to reach consensus. Well, I don't hear any unreadiness or questions. So can we declare that we have consensus that this work in process, which will be presented at every BLC meeting for questions and updates and any changes that anyone would like to make, because the BLC will own the strategy chart. But I can tell you the main purpose is to sign up 300 new members over the next 3 years. We're almost at the halfway mark for the 50 members in the short term. But I can tell you for sure by June, the way I'm signing up members, we will reach 50 new members by June. And then we need to get another 50 members by December. So that's the main thing. We are building the U.S. section of WIL. So, Madam Facilitator, can we declare that we have consensus?
I believe so. Let me just check something in the chat. Okay. Is there any objection? Do we have consensus? I believe we do, Teresa, so we can say that we have consensus to your question.
Great. Well, the final thing on the old business is a simple question, which again, we need to reach consensus on. Should the representatives from branches only be people of African descent? So I do know that Rosa does not identify as a person of African descent. So we said that the representatives from the Triangle branch would be Mary White and Ashley Carrington. We have 2 representatives from the Triad branch who are Shemaye, I think, and George Friday from the Fannie Lou Hamer branch. We have Deidre Whittlesey and me. Deidre's mother's funeral was yesterday, which is why she's not here. Did go to the funeral representing Southern Network, and at any rate, but the question became because we have so many people of color and indigenous folks who will be a part of the Black Liberation Caucus meetings, will they be allowed to be a part of the consensus when we decide to reach consensus if they are not persons of African descent? That is the question before you. And my position is, I think that based on the fact that people are included in these meetings, for instance, in the Cape Cod branch, Donna, Phil, and whoever the other person is, are not people of African descent, but they are indigenous people of color. I say that they should be allowed to represent the Cape Cod branch. That was why I raised the question in the November meeting, I think, and we never settled the question, but we really do need to settle the question today. Do people disagree with me? Do people think that everyone must be a person who identifies as a person of African descent in order to participate in the consensus?
So there are some comments in the chat. Ashley says, I don't think we should limit other people of color who are aligned with BLC. Shante agrees. George has another call and she needs to go. Adrian says, I think all people of color should be allowed. I also agree. I think all people of color should be included.
Well, I think it sounds like we have consensus that BIPOC, Black Indigenous people of color who are participating in the Black Liberation Caucus, that they will be allowed to represent their branches. And so that would mean that Donna Phil and whoever else is representing that branch. Julie represents the Boston branch, and she says she's the only person of color in the branch. As I recall, she can correct me if I'm wrong. And Rebecca, you're the representative from Detroit. And so I think we have settled the question, and it's right at 6 o'clock. So the only issue to be decided, Rebecca.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for staying on and giving time to these really important issues. I believe we have reached consensus on all of our issues this afternoon and evening. So the one piece of business that has not been decided is who is facilitating the next meeting. Is there anyone from the Cape Cod branch on this call? So I was not present at earlier meetings and I do not know who would be next. Teresa, I believe you mentioned if it is not Cape Cod, then Fresno is up. Is that correct?
Yes, because Fresno and San Francisco combine. We don't need to necessarily combine them. At the time, I think they were the first ones, but we clearly can have one facilitator, as Rebecca has shown with the excellent job that she's done. So Dr. Jean, that means that, so the next meeting is, I believe, March 27th. So we'll drop down to, I think, volunteers at this point. And I think the earlier folks were the triad. So George isn't here, but is
I'm
Shemai?
here. Ashley says that Triangle can do it.
Well, the triangle just did it recently. So I think we're going back to the top of the list, which will involve the triad.
No problem,
So
we can do it.
great. Well, the question is settled. So it's a triad. And so we're starting the rotation again. Fresno is not in the rotation. So next on the rotation would be the new branch, which would be the Southern Piedmont branch, which is a division between, well, actually, George, you would be in the Southern Piedmont branch when that's established next week. So maybe we can go to Metro Atlanta, and then the Triangle, and then Fannie Lou Hamer. So we can just figure out the next 4 months. So March for the Triad, April for Metro Atlanta, and May for the Triangle, and then Fannie Lou Hamer will take June. It may even be my birthday because my birthday is June 27th. So can we reach consensus on that rotation for the next 4 months? Madam Facilitator, could we do that?
Yes. Does anyone disagree with the proposal of the next 4 months of branches?
Quickly, I have to go right now and I don't have my schedule in front of me to commit to that, but I can send out an email to Teresa by tomorrow to let her know if that works, and that can go out to the whole Black, or Teresa or George to go out to the Black Liberation Caucus.
Okay, well, George and I will work on it and make sure we put it on the chart, and we will have the branch names by the BLC meetings on the chart going forward. But it's next month, March, Triad, Metro Atlanta, possibly the last Sunday in April, and then the Triangle, the last Sunday in May, and then Fannie Lou Hamer, the last Sunday in June. And that will get us through the first 6 months of the strategic chart. So I really appreciate that. Madam Facilitator, it's up to you to close the meeting.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for staying on, and we are now closed. Thank you again, and we will see you next month.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a great night.